How America is losing control. Rome wasn't built in a day, but neither was it destroyed in a single day. Pax Americana has long passed its peak, culturally, economically, industrially, politically, and militarily. Like all empires, it had a beginning, a middle, and is now at its end. If you were to plot this on a timeline, it would be somewhat of a bell curve, with both the rise and fall being represented as gradual inclines and declines respectively. Just like Rome, the United States was founded as a republic, which then proceeded to grow into a predatory empire of unstoppable greed. Technological advances of the 20th century allowed for unprecedented global influence, with Americanism reaching all regions of the globe. This isn't to say that America has been nothing but a negative force on the world, at least not prior to 9/11. Certainly, in the last 20 years, the USA has had nothing to offer but destruction. America has helped generate a lot of wealth across the world as a side effect of liberal capitalism. Had it not been for American corporate greed and short-sighted policies, China would not be this industrial juggernaut we see today, which is now posing a huge problem for the ruling class, who think they can take on not only China, but also Russia, with a hollowed-out industrial base. So the US is a victim of its own success. American predatory practices with regards to foreign policy began with the Spanish-American War of 1898. Albeit, this was still very much on America's doorstep. It was the beginning of the American global empire. It was, however, Great Britain that propelled the USA into the position of global hegemon at the end of World War II. The inner core of the ruling class elites was already transatlantic and had no true allegiances to either Britain or the USA. These internationalists simply pivoted to Washington and made it their power base due to the vulnerability of Britain during World War II with its proximity to mainland Europe. The Eurasian land powers have never been fully under Atlantis' control, which as sea powers can never hope to conquer. The best they can do is to keep them divided by convincing them to fight each other, as we've seen throughout history, from the Napoleonic Wars to the Great Wars of the 20th century, and all the way to present-day Ukraine. In 1945, the USA emerged as the most powerful economy with an industrial capacity greater than the entire world combined. With relatively low casualties and a completely intact industry following World War II, the US had built up the world's most powerful navy, replacing Great Britain, which was left severely weakened and with a crumbling empire. However, the same entity that was behind Pax Britannia moved over to Pax Americana and simply continued its predatory endeavors. Hence why it's referred to as the Anglo-American establishment, or the Atlanticists. It's the same group of elites, they simply moved to a bigger ship. As America consolidated its power after World War II, it still had to contend with the USSR, which acted as a counterbalance, preventing outright American dominance over the world, which was split into two spheres for almost half a century, with each side attempting to gain as many allies as possible, which for the most part effectively meant acquiring vassal states, as both sides installed client regimes through hard or soft power. The Third World, or Global South, a more relevant expression, basically had two choices during this period: the so-called Free Liberal West, or the authoritarian Communist East, where the state controls everything. Some claimed to not be aligned with either side, but very few were truly neutral, and most non-aligned nations secretly chose a side. But with the end of the Cold War came the end of choice for the Global South, as they were forced to submit to American hegemony or face completely organic and totally not funded revolutions, resulting in civil unrest or outright war.
You're either with us or you're with the enemy.
Many of the former colonies, especially in Africa, went through very difficult times during decolonization, which had left power vacuums, resulting in terrible conflicts, which were usually funded by the USSR and USA, as they used the belligerents as proxies to force in their own puppet regime, whilst pushing the opposing side out. However, just as these Banana Republic wars were coming to an end, so did their choice in alliances, as in, join us or die.
Either you are with us, or you are with the terrorists.
For most African countries, it wasn't that difficult for Washington to persuade, as they are more easily bought and paid for, and are less effective at any kind of organized resistance. Whereas the Arab world is a different story. These countries have proven to be more difficult to commandeer, subvert, and control. Even when Washington has been able to install a client regime, their chosen dictator often goes off script and falls into outright rebellion. America then found itself playing whack-a-mole all over the Middle East as it tried to contain its vassals. The only reason the Gulf states have been so stable is the sheer amount of oil coupled with the ruthlessness of the House of Saud, which pays off its citizens in a giant welfare state with severe punishment for any dissenting behavior, all under the watchful eye of Washington. This war in Ukraine has exposed America's weakness as the collective West begins losing control over the global South. France has recently lost its de facto colonies all over West Africa. BRICS is receiving new applications every month, and cracks are beginning to emerge, even in Europe, as Germany seeks to keep good relations with China and Russia, albeit secretly. For German industry, there is no other option but to repair relations with Moscow, something Washington desperately wants to prevent, which is why they sabotaged Nord Stream. Watch my previous video for more details on this. The world is in transition as we see the global South in outright rebellion against the American-led NWO, as they refuse to go along with the condemnation of Russia and the sanctioning of China. It is becoming increasingly apparent that Washington's power is and has been illusory, as its empire begins to unravel, or shall I say, is happening at a faster pace. The world is no longer being fooled by so-called terrorism and color revolutions.
The terrorists.
As the curtain is being pulled back, exposing the devious puppet master, manipulating and deceiving, it is clear that the only terrorist is the Anglo-American deep state, controlling Washington's and every other Western nation's foreign policy through proxy. The collective West has made an enemy out of the entire world, which given any chance will turn against them after decades of being forced to adopt so-called Western values. The Western establishment is not content with being the number one power. It insists on forcing every other country to adopt liberal values and condemns any nation that refuses, labeling them backward, oppressive, or simply evil. There is no middle ground.
Either you're with us, or you're with the enemy. There's no in-between.
The world is watching as the war in Ukraine, which is the current ideological battleground, unfolds and will decide the future of the world. What will it be? The continuation of unipolar globalism led by the Atlanticists, that is, the USA, Israel, and Britain, as they consolidate power over the entire world with neoliberalism, or a multipolar planet of sovereign nations that simply want to do business without others trying to impose their values onto them. For this reason, we see most, if not the entire world, outside of the collective West, cheering on Russia as it defeats not the Ukraine, but the American globalist establishment, which is hiding under the Ukrainian uniform. We see the Russian flag flown all over Africa and the Middle East, as it represents victory over neocolonialism and the defeat of America as global terrorist. Hegemon. America is being dethroned, but instead of another tyrannical emperor taking its place, we will see more of an egalitarian order of nations in a round table configuration of sensible, pragmatic, and grounded leaders, free of unrealistic, ideological driven policy.
You're either with us or you're with the enemy. That's clear. I will continue to make